Well, hey everybody, this is Chris DiFurio with Keys to the Shop, and welcome to another edition of Shift Break. No video today, actually, because we're kind of off-site and in travel mode, but going old school with the audio-only podcast. You know, when podcasts used to be just audio, that was pretty crazy, right? So you're just going to have to imagine the video. It would have been such a great video. It's just me. You know what I look like. Anyway, I am excited for today's episode, and it is brought to you by our friends at La Marzocco. La Marzocco has been making espresso machines by hand in Florence since 1927. So you're talking about nearly 100 years of making the world's best espresso machines. They are at the corner. They're the cornerstone, is what I want to say, of so many amazing coffee bars around the world. I have always loved working on them. I think you're going to love working on them too. And maybe you do. And you're like, yeah, I do. Then we have that in common. Go us. But I want to encourage you to look up lamarzocousa.com to see what they have to offer. Email info@lamarzocousa.com, and they will help you get fitted with the right piece of equipment for your cafe, whether it's something a little bit more on the manual side or automatic. Their machines are tailored to lots of different contexts. I'm pretty partial to the Linea PB myself. A lot of clients of mine go with that one, or things like the KB90. We've talked with some people on the show. Most notably, Charles Babinski uses the Leva at his shop in Australia. So yeah, lots to choose from. Go check them out over at lamarzocousa.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rattleware website, rattleware.com. It is huge that your small wares work. It's common sense. So if it doesn't work, though, if your shot glasses dribble, if your pitchers break and the weld is bad, if your knockbox is just not functioning, it makes a big difference for morale and the functionality of your business. You get to focus on all of these annoying little things. That's what Rattleware with you wants to solve, right? That's why they make small wares that just work. So if you go to rattleware.com, you can see all that they have to offer. If you're in the market for replenishing or starting with a good stock of great small wares for your cafe, go check them out today over at rattleware.com. Okay, everybody. So today I am going to talk to you a little bit about something that just kind of came up in my mind today, but I think it's been stewing beneath the surface for a little bit. Somebody asked me a question in an email about some issues at their shop, and they're wanting, some advice, and I'm about ready to type out an email and give some response. And in the explanation, they were talking about how they're a third wave shop. And it got me thinking, okay, well, I don't know if I know what that is anymore. And I don't know if many of us know what that is anymore. In fact, I think if it's hard for us to define, it's hard for the customer to even care. In fact, even when third wave coffee was at its height of popularity and snobbishness and, whatever, it's hard to imagine that so many customers actually cared that much about what we were defining ourselves as versus what we delivered to the customer. The customer needs us to deliver something to them that is tasty, consistent, and in a kind way, in a clean place, lit in a intentional way. There's a few things that make a coffee shop. Everything else is just kind of a brand, but we get preoccupied with questions about what is my identity as a coffee shop. We have to figure out our identity oftentimes right away, because then it seemingly will take the guesswork out of decisions that we need to make later on. So if we say, well, we're a third wave shop, so that means third wave shops do these things and we will do these things. So that feels temptingly easy. Wow. Okay. Well, that took a lot of guesswork out of things. Because we're a third wave shop, we're going to not do this. We are going to do that. We're going to use these types of grooming tools in our portafilters. We're going to be really fussy about the extraction ratios to the degree that absolutely no human can taste, but it makes us feel good. We're going to prove these things to ourselves, but often it's at the expense of listening to what the customer wants and soliciting feedback or discussing in amongst each other in the cafe, in the staff leadership. What is it that has changed over the last year? Who do we need to become for the purpose of not falling in line with we're a third wave shop, third wave shops do these things, robotically following the marching orders of something that you branded yourself with for therapeutic convenience in the beginning. Rather, your identity is based on the community that you serve. And sure, there's taste involved, and sure, there's an intersection of your customer and you and everything else. But you don't actually have to decide what kind of shop you are. You just need to become the kind of shop you need to be. Let me say that again. You don't need to decide what kind of shop you are. You just need to become the kind of shop you need to be. That happens in relationship, in conversation. The conversational nature of reality around us and our businesses is what makes this whole thing dynamic. It's what makes independent operations actually a little bit more attractive than the corporate ones, because where there's a lot of predictability with the feel, the smell, the textures, and everything else of a large brand, with an independent shop, there's a little bit more perceived intentionality between the people that are actually serving you your coffee and you, because you understand these people actually had maybe some part to play in what I'm experiencing right now versus a cookie cutter model. And it's easy for us today to put on the uniform of the third wave cookie cutter model, the progressive coffee bar model, even if it's just a version of a coffee shop that we've come up with in our heads, that we like this aspect of a cafe that we went to in this country, or, well, I like that, I like this, and I'm going to put it all together, I'm going to roll it up into a ball and make it into a coffee shop. Sometimes those like vision boards on Pinterest will actually work to deliver to you something that is meaningful. And sometimes it creates a lot of confusion. And the only way that you're going to know if things work together, and think in culinary terms, when they use the word fusion, often people will say, well, sometimes there's fusion confusion. There's certain things that just don't go together. This is why I love the book, The Flavor Bible, because it has sort of these reasonable pairings of various flavors in food and in desserts and other culinary areas. You have to actually taste it for yourself to know that it doesn't go really. And that is basically saying it's experience. You can follow some guidelines at first, but when you experience it and taste it yourself, you're going to see the goodness or the not so goodness of it. So all of this to say, what I think we need to do here is not get hung up on what type of shop we want to be. There might be some base principles that you employ. For example, today I talked with a client. We're just finishing up an engagement, and for him, he wants a very simple menu. Now, here's the reason he wants a simple menu. And you see, there's a reason behind it. It's not just third wave shops have simple menus, so we're going to do simple menus. No, it's about work-life balance. It's about starting small. It's so that we can manage our time well between already things that are already committed to. It has a lot of really good, reasonable thought behind it. So I would encourage you now to kind of think, what did I assume that I needed to do that I just have sort of employed, but didn't really think through? Maybe I've obsessed too much with posturing so that people will more readily recognize the group I belong to versus working hard to help people feel like they belong. What if it's about me redirecting my energy? Maybe inadvertently we've got into some navel gazing too much, or we were comparing ourselves too much with other cafes, and that the community of coffee, as we're a part of that access to so many different coffee shops, is a blessing and a curse. That comparison, well, we want to be part of that order of people and shops that are, leading the charge, and it's our culture, the coffee culture. And truly, the best coffee culture that could form in mass is going to come from people who focus in a microcosm, in the small. They're not focused on, hey, let's create a huge movement in the USA if we're all do the same thing. It's the fact that we got to where we are largely is because independent shops operated in isolation for so long. And with social media, a lot of connection came. And that's where the sanitized and monochromatic sort of sameness of third wave coffee started to become a thing, because people started to simply manifest into their four walls the exact same thing that they saw here, there, and it's just lacking imagination, lacking meaning, and falls flat with the customer. And we're all about now bringing this back to this idea of people justifying the amount of coffee or the amount of money they're spending on coffee, we have to get back to this idea of doing right within that first inner circle of stakeholders in our businesses. It's us, our staff, our neighborhoods in that wider community, and let it go out from there. The big picture of coffee, when you take those intentional steps with integrity in a others focused direction, is going to take care of itself more so than if you were kind of wringing your hands trying to figure out, when am I? Where do I belong? And all the while, these existential questions are sort of wasting your existence. And so that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. I hope that makes sense. And maybe it's a little ephemeral. It's maybe a little out there. It's not like, hey, it's step one, step two. Here's what you do today at 3 p.m. on, Thursday. But I think that this conversation happens a lot more than we think it does in our minds, in groups. And when we feel imposter syndrome, especially that, like the imposter syndrome is that feeling of wanting to belong to something greater than yourself because it's actually an impulse for you to become greater. It shouldn't be leading you to try to, fall in line with people who will affirm you for just exactly where you are right now. In my opinion, I think imposter syndrome is similar to stress in some ways. Stress is your body's way of preparing you for action. And if you waste it, then it turns into something that harms you. If you waste the imposter syndrome and don't recognize that it's actually an impulse that should push you further into growth, personal growth, professional growth, and you will earn that maturity in different levels where you might stop caring what other people think, or you will start to recognize certain people that are worth pursuing their thoughts on your business. But the way imposter syndrome works, it usually doesn't discriminate between people. It just, you want everyone to like you, and any harsh word like sets you off. And that's because, again, I think it's just a natural part of growth that we shouldn't try to just get rid of. We should let it instruct us. And so, again, that existential question of what kind of shop should I be? What are we? Let's define ourselves. And let's just make this more of a conversation that unfolds over time and apprentice ourselves to the process of becoming. Okay, so that's it. Thanks everybody so much, and I will see you here next week on another edition of Shift Break, from keys to the shop.